They weren't the biggest, the fastest, or even the most respected, but these American V8 engines, often overlooked, underestimated, or even laughed at, ended up becoming true street legends. Welcome to the world of underrated American V8 icons. Ford 347 Stroker. From the early 1990s to today, the Ford 347 Stroker is proof that you don't need a giant big block to make serious power. Built from the humble 302 small block, the 347 uses a longer 3.40-inch crank and a 4.030-inch bore to stretch displacement to 347 cubic inches. The combo exploded in popularity in the 1990s when companies started selling complete rotating assemblies and crate engines that dropped straight into Fox body Mustangs and classic Fords. Suddenly, a lightweight small block could make torque like an old big block, but with better throttle response and rev-happy manners. From the factory, 5.0 Mustangs left the showroom with around 225 to 240 horsepower, a well-built 347 with good aluminum heads, a healthy hydraulic roller cam, and a decent intake can easily live in the 400-plus horsepower range on pump gas with torque in the mid-400 pound-feet zone. Builders love the engine because it bolts into any chassis that took a 289/302 and keeps the same external dimensions, motor mounts, and accessory drive. That means it fits classic Mustangs, Falcons, Fairlanes, street rods, kit cars, almost anything. Buick 455 1970 to 1976. The Buick 455 Big Block was GM's quiet, torquey king of the early 70s. Introduced in 1970 as the largest member of Buick's Big Block family, it used a 4.3125-inch bore and 3.90-inch stroke to reach 455 cubic inches. Unlike some heavier big blocks, the Buick 455 used thin wall casting, so it weighed less than a Chevy 454 while still delivering brutal torque. That made it a perfect match for big, comfortable Buicks that could still smoke the rear tires at will. In its hottest form, the GS 455 Stage 1 factory ratings listed around 360 gross horsepower and a massive 510 pound-feet of torque, one of the highest torque ratings of any muscle car engine of the era. Even in net-rated, low-compression later years, the 455 remained a stump puller. Stage 1 versions were rated around 510 pound-feet. Chevrolet 305 Small Block 1976 to 1998. The Chevrolet 305 is the corporate small block that everyone loves to hate, but it quietly powered millions of cars and trucks for over 2 decades. Introduced for 1976 as a 5.0-liter economy-minded V8, it used a 3.736-inch bore and the same 3.48-inch stroke as the 350, landing at 305 cubic inches. GM needed an engine that met tightening emissions rules, improved fuel economy, and still offered smoother performance than inline 6s and early V6s. The 305 was that compromise. However, with the right heads, cam, and tuning, a 305 can still be a fun street engine, especially in a light car. Many budget builds simply swap on better heads and bump compression a bit. The 305 found its way into everything from third-gen Camaros and Monte Carlos to pickups, Caprices, and police cruisers. Chevy 383 Stroker from the late 1980s to today. The Chevrolet 383 Stroker is probably the most famous small block Chevy that GM never built. It starts life as a 350, but uses the 400 small block's 3.75-inch crankshaft combined with a 4.030-inch bore to reach 383 cubic inches. Hot rodders figured out that this combo gave them more cubes, more torque, and very little extra weight, the ultimate budget torque monster. By the late 80s and 90s, every speed shop catalog had 383 rotating assemblies and crate engines on the menu. Where a typical warmed-over 350 might make 300 to 350 horsepower, a well-sorted 383 with decent heads, cam, and intake can easily push 450-plus horsepower with a fat torque curve that starts low. Technically, the 383 is pretty simple. That's part of the charm. Builders either clearance a 350 block for the longer stroke or start with an aftermarket block. Chevrolet 400 small block 1970 to 1980. The 400 small block Chevy was the largest displacement factory SBC ever built. Introduced for 1970 full-size cars and trucks, it used a huge 4.125-inch bore and 3.75-inch stroke for a true 400 cubic inches. Unlike other small blocks, the cylinders were Siamesed, no coolant passages between them, which required special steam holes in the block and heads to prevent hot spots. GM never really marketed it as a muscle engine. It was meant for smooth torque in big sedans and pickups, not for high RPM racing. Early 400s with higher compression and two-barrel carbs were rated around 265 to 330 gross horsepower, but the real story was torquing, climbing over 400 pound-feet in truck trims. When built correctly, a 400 base small block can make serious power. 500 plus horsepower naturally aspirated is common. Chevrolet L88 427, 1967 to 1969. The Chevrolet L88 427 is one of the wildest factory big blocks ever to wear a bow tie. Offered as a racing-oriented option in the C2 and early C3 Corvette from 1967 to 1969, the L88 wasn't meant for casual street use. It featured high-flow aluminum heads, a radical solid lifter camshaft, 12.5:1 compression, a big Holley 4-barrel carb, and heavy-duty internals designed for sustained high RPM. On paper, Chevrolet rated it at just 430 horsepower, but that was a deliberate lie to discourage regular customers and keep insurance companies away. Real output was closer to 540 to 550 horsepower in stock trim. Because the L88 was intended for racing, Chevrolet quietly deleted many comfort features when you ordered it. Oldsmobile 403, 1977 to 1979. The Oldsmobile 403 is one of the most interesting late 70s V8s. Introduced for the 1977 model year, it replaced the big block 455 in many applications, but was technically a small block, just one with a massive 4.35 1-inch bore and 3.385 inch stroke for 403 cubic inches. That bore is actually larger than a Chevy 454's, making the 403 famous for its huge pistons. Because of emissions rules, compression was only about 8:1, and factory rating sat around 185 to 200 net horsepower, but torque was strong and smooth, perfect for big B-body Buicks, Oldsmobiles, and Pontiacs. For street and mild strip use, it's fine, but high RPM engines benefit from main cap girdles and bottom-end reinforcement. With the right parts, a street-friendly 403 can reach 350 to 400 horsepower and deliver big torque while still looking completely period correct.